Simon, for letting us use their loft again. And, it's a new loft for those of you who have been here, so it's under construction. That's why it's hard. And today, Dr. Sobey plans to discuss the Einstein affair, or the relationship that Reich had with Einstein, and open it to questions. And then after a break, we're going to have an opportunity to discuss some of the Reich blood tests, looking at blood under the microscope. Dr. Sobey has a unique position in that he continued to do the work after Dr. Reich's death until the late 60s or early 70s.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of laboratory work. So it's a chance to ask questions or get a sense of it from someone who on-hand experience. And this, if you haven't put your name on the mailing list, please do. This will be a continuing series. We'll start again in the spring, and I will get the mailings out to you. And for those of you who haven't paid, just contact me during the break. Okay? Dr. Sobey.
Okay. As Dr. Lewis said, Einstein affair, and I want to introduce it with what's happening at the present day. In the field of present-day astrophysics, as everybody's been reading about with the Hubble telescope, looking for where all the mass in space is, the biggest enigma is where 90% of the mass is in the universe. They thought they'd be able to somehow with the Hubble telescope, you all know about the Hubble telescope, would somehow or other detect all or some of it. With the sending of the Hubble telescope into the sky, it was thought and hoped that some or all of the missing mass could be located. However, as revealed in the New York Times of 11/29/94, none of this mass could be found or be accounted for. Space physicists say it was there, but cannot be detected or seen up to this point in the Hubble telescope. I mentioned this news report to report on the Einstein affair, which began between Einstein and Wilhelm Reich. At that time, Albert Einstein stated that most of the space was empty. However, with the discovery of orgone energy, proved that space was filled with OR and could be accountable for the so-called empty space. What was known then, and they still can account for, the planets and suns, the moons, and asteroids, and so forth. At that particular time, in the continuum while Dr. Reich was in, when he tried to combine Marx's teaching with psychoanalysis, and he claimed that they could exist side by side, and Dr. Reich actually did go to Russia for a few years, and he soon became quite disillusioned because the whole society, while they claimed to be sex positive, was quite sex negative, and also they could not accept any part of psychoanalytical theories. And I remember at one time, and of course he was attacked in Vienna, and Freud just sort of was indifferent to it, didn't attack him on it, but many of his colleagues. But the communists, or as Dr. Reich called the red fascists, because I mentioned in the last lecture that, not the last lecture, but the last time I met with him before he went to jail, he said to me, there's such a thing as a good communist. But he said, there are none around. He said, they're all red fascists, and I want you to know that I'm still a Marxist. Well, course, in the College of Ergonomy, Dr. Chavez?
Chavis.
I think they're aware of I made that statement. It came to them somehow, and they thought it was all ridiculous. Now, either I was daydreaming when he told me that, and I know what he meant, the positive aspects of Marxism. But they said, no, he was always against red fascism, communism. Okay, so, and Dr. Ike said, if you're talking to somebody and you don't know whether they're a red fascist or not, just mention Ergonomy and Wilhelm Reich, and they'll really go up in air, anger. Okay, now here the Einstein affair, which is, I don't know how many people know about it, or read about it, and there's a series. It's important that the letters be read because between Einstein. On December 30th, 1940, Dr. Reich wrote to Professor Einstein, I would like to talk to you in a scientifically difficult and urgent matter. I am working in biophysics and psychosomatic research. From 1922 until 1930, I was Freud's assistant at the Vienna Polyclinic, and I am at present teaching experimental and clinical biopsychology at the New School for Social Research in New York. Dr. Reich at that time was in Norway, working, had a laboratory at the University in Norway, and he had the approval of the university, and he had a rather big laboratory doing electrical work on sexual functioning, and he was, at that time, he attached electrodes to the genitalia, and at that, people thought that was just really far out. Today, that's not far out. Ola Rockness was his closest ally there, and Nick Wall, who studied with him, was psychoanalyst, and she was very close to Dr. Reich, and she went to Meninger's clinic, where she wanted to get further study in traditional classical psychoanalysis, and supported Dr. Reich the whole time she was there. And in fact, she used to demonstrate the armor to the other residents and doctors there, and she pointed out many things which was quite correct, and they were amazed, but the managers got after her and Dr. Silbert, and they just discredited it all anyhow. Dr. Reich continues in the letter, several years ago I discovered a specific biologically effective energy which behaves in many respects differently as all that is known about electromagnetic energy. The entire matter is much too complicated and sounds too incredible to be clarified and presented comprehensively in a letter. All I can say now in a few words is that this energy, which I call orgone, has definitely been proven as existent in the living organism as well as in the soil and the temperature, by making it visible, by concentrating it, and by temperature measurements. I am also operating with this energy with some success in research of cancer therapy. The matter has grown factually as well as economically far above my needs and needs cooperation on a large scale. There are a few points which make it seem possible that it would be used in the fight against the fascist pestilence. Now, Dr. Reich knew, of course, of Einstein when Einstein was in Vienna, and Einstein knew of Freud, and he had heard of Wilhelm Reich, and also sort of differences that was going on between Freud's other cohorts, but didn't pay much attention to it. The matter is much too important as to expose it to the danger of complete destruction through the irrational in the scientific world. And so often happens, it would be good and useful in every way if I could let you know more about the matter before I would ask you to come to my laboratory and to look at the phenomena. My caution not to use the usual way of sending a report to the Academy of Physics may seem strange. It is the result of extremely bad experiences, meaning with other traditional psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, and medicine in general, and physicists. On January 6, 1941, Einstein answered, "Dear Mr. Reich," he called him Mr. Reich at that time, even though Dr. Reich addressed himself as Dr. Reich. "I am very willing to talk over your scientific matters with you, and would have proposed that you come to see me some afternoon after having made an appointment in advance. With kind regards, yours, Albert Einstein." On January 6th, 8th, Dr. Reich sent a letter back to Professor Einstein. "I received your letter of January 6th and would propose an appointment on Monday, January 13th at about 4 p.m. Kindly let me know if this time is not convenient for you. I can get off at any time with the exception of Wednesdays when I hold my lectures at the new school." On January 9th, "Dear Professor Reich," and at that time he put Professor Reich because he said he was teaching at the new school. Professor Einstein will be glad to see you at the time proposed by you. Very truly, Helen Dukas, Einstein's secretary." And then on the 15th of January, after he had met with Einstein, and they had looked through the orgonoscope, which is a viewer which, when looked into concentrated field of orgone energy created by accumulating materials, you could see the orgone energy much better, which Einstein observed with Dr. Reich. "Dear Mr. Einstein, I have ordered today the apparatus for the observation of the temperature differences through the orgone radiation." Now, the temperature differences was a very simple thing where Dr. Reich would have a plate of orgone material about 1.5 inches high, and he had a centigrade thermometer hanging over that in a box, accumulated box. And over here he would have a box with not accumulated material, with the same thickness, but not over a plate which contained argon accumulating material. And Dr. Reich showed that the one over accumulating materials would always have a higher temperature. So after Einstein had observed the argon accumulating through the orgonoscope, he was very excited about it. He said, "My God," he said, I see it. So Dr. Reich said, "Okay, the next thing I'll show you is the temperature differences. The apparatus will be smaller than those which I use here." That's in his laboratory. "About 2.3 cubic feet instead of 1 cubic foot. I will have a cellulose ester plate on the front side and will be fitted with an arrangement," and so forth. "I would like to take this occasion to thank you once again for your extraordinary kindness in being willing to go this matter. As I have told you before, I do not wish to publish anything about the entire matter until I have had the possibility of securing 100% exact all the observed phenomena by the proper means. And Einstein said he would keep it quiet too until they could agree to talking to other people about it. The talk with you have given me very much. The use of the organoscope which I left with you will give you pleasure if you get used to it. You can observe the scintillations with and without the cellulose ester plate. That was one sort of material between the organoscope and the argon energy, and it gave a different type of color. But they are more clearly visible with the plate. That's the metal thing. The metal screen should always be kept on the organoscope when it is not in use to keep the sunlight away from the cellulose plate. It's, academic, which is powdered on the inside with calcium sulfide. But you can also use zinc sulfide, and the plate can be used too, without any substance at all. For observation of the radiation on a cloudless and moonless night sky, the tube in itself is sufficient. Didn't need anything. In a dark room, you could, with the organoscope, and I've seen it many times, you could see the argon energy quite clearly. I forgot a sketch and a scroll of greatest graphic design at your house. I shall take them with me when I bring the apparatus. Then on January 20th, this was after Einstein had, was it? What year was it? 41. After Einstein, the first time spent 4 or 5 hours and quite excited by it and all like that. And then with the temperature differences, apparatus, he confirmed that too. And then January 20th, after a couple of weeks, dear Mr. Einstein, kindly let me know whether it would suit you if I bring the apparatus for measurement of the temperature either at the end of this week, Saturday or Sunday at about 4 p.m., or during the next week, Wednesday or Thursday at the same time, to show you how to use it. The apparatus worked well here for 8 days, and I suppose it will function just as well at your house. Yours, Willem Reich. And on the 29th of January, 41, dear Dr. By this time he's calling him Dear Dr. Reich. Professor Einstein will be glad to see you this coming Saturday afternoon. Then on February 7th, 1941, this is a long letter. I won't read the whole thing. But he goes on to say, explain in detail how to the functioning of the TO-2 and when to do it, what time of day, when to do it. And he went on to say the value, describe the medical use that up to that point that he had found in the use of the accumulator. Summarize the effect of the radiation as observed thus far are the following. Elimination of pain, even if extremely severe. Dissolution of the cancer tumors, which he described in one case of a woman Well, let me go back here. He spoke to, he described how he treated the first patient with accumulator. About 3 weeks after my report to you, a man who advises me in the tax matters and thus happened to know about my cancer experiments with mice asked me whether I would undertake an experiment with the sister of one of his friends. She was suffering from a cancer of the breast and had been bedridden for 2 years. She had been given up by her physicians and was expected to die any day. She suffered from excruciating pains. Her spinal column showed collapsed vertebrae in 2 places, and there were a number of metastatic tumors in the pelvic bones. I decided to undertake the experiment with the orgone accumulator, especially designed for human subjects, in which the patient was exposed to the radiation. This radiation was given daily for half an hour to an hour. In the course of about 3 weeks, the pains disappeared, and the hemoglobin rose from 33% to a normal level of 85%. X-rays showed the tumors in the pelvic bones in a process of disintegration, and the destroyed bone parts in the process of regeneration by way of calcium deposit. Today, the patient can be considered well for the time being. Now, that was a very dramatic case, but he said for the time being. I'll just skip. And Dr. Ike had continued from 41 until 50, working on the cancer problem. A few other cases, many of them, most of them all responded well. But eventually, they lived longer than they were supposed to. A lot of the pain was eliminated. And then Dr. Ike sort of, by 1950, gave up on the cancer research because he found that as the tumors broke down, the patient got relief and everything, and the breakdown of the tumors were confirmed by X-ray and also by medical surgeons. He found that the breakdown of the tissues would clog up the lymphatics and posed an entirely different problem. Also, Dr. Ike came to the conclusion that cancer is a biopathy that spawns for many years, which even classical medicine knows that, pretty much accepted that now, and that by the time the tumor appears, it's, from his standpoint, it's too late as far as orgone treatment of cancer by the accumulator is concerned. So he mentioned that at that time, this was in 41, he hadn't reached that decision. But he mentioned this treatment of several patients, hoping that Einstein would be more impressed, or would be impressed, and contact other people. And then there was no correspondence between Einstein and Dr. Ike, and he said he would contact with him. That was from the end of February, and by May 17th, Dr. Ike had received nothing from Einstein, or from his office. So on May 17th, Dr. Ike wrote, "Dear Mr. Einstein, I ask myself why I have not yet received an answer to my letters of February 20th and May 1st. I would be thankful in the interest of the work if you would let me know definitely whether my information has been further examined or whether there is no interest in it. I would not have put this question now, but the therapy experiments on cancerous human beings are being talked about and call for new efforts every day. With best regards, Willem Wright." Then still didn't receive anything. And they wrote back to him, "Dear Mr. Einstein, I cannot understand why you do not answer my letters, since you were so enthusiastic and was going to further study the temperature difference in the orgonoscope. Well, a very short time ago, I was of the opinion that you were waiting for the results of some kind of examination. You will understand that I could not regard your letter of February 7th as a final step in this matter, because the phenomena of the temperature differences was confirmed by you, and it is now only the question of the wrong interpretation of your assistant, which was definitely refuted through the measurement in the open air." Now, Einstein obviously did give it to one of his assistants, a physicist by the name of Einstein, and he dismissed the TO minus T experiments by saying that it was just convection currents which caused the temperature differences around the accumulating substances. And Dr. Reich, after that, disputed that, or showed Einstein that was wrong, because Einstein put both of them in the ground where there could be no convection currents, and the TO minus T difference was still positive while it was in the ground. The temperature thermometers and everything. But Einstein or his assistant never answered that or refuted it. Furthermore, I cannot presume that you regard my earnest information as not to be taken seriously or as a swindle. Otherwise, you would not have listened to me for 8.5 hours with some interest and understanding. You would not have been willing to take an apparatus to make your own observation and to give the promise to help in the matter, should the difference in temperature be a fact with you. After all this, your silence cannot be understood. Through the explanation of the temperature differences by the tabletop, this matter was, of course, far from being solved, especially as the differences can be observed also in the open air. If you did not want to continue this matter, all you had to do was write that you were no longer interested in it. I cannot concede either that you keep in suspense a matter of such serious and far-reaching consequences as some people suspect who know academic behavior. Neither do I believe, after the talk I had with you, that you are conceited. You don't have to resort to such means to get out of a decisive affair. I have therefore, in all these last months, rejected all such suppositions as being unworthy of concern. I was of the firm belief that you have recognized the mentioned misinterpretation refuted through the experiment in the open air, and that you further studied the matter. Therefore, I informed you about the first observation on cancer patient and about those connected with the weather conditions. Furthermore, I do not work alone, but I have to confer constantly with specialists and co-workers. The further development of the work on the atmospheric orgone energy does not depend on your confirmation, and certainly not on the misinterpretation of your assistants. And then he ends the letter by saying, I can only assure you that I would have much preferred not to write such a letter. I ask you to be completely frank also in the case that you have heard malicious rumors about me. This matter is no child's play, and it is not one of these discoveries which are supported economically by rich foundations and announced every week with loud fanfare in the Times, New York Times. It is no private affair of mine either, but a work of importance for the good of all. I am just as much afraid of these hyenas in the scientific world as you are, but the fact that the function of the orgone energy takes place directly and visibly before all eyes is far more important. Then by November, Dr. Reich got no answer at all, and so Ilse Ollendorf, Dr. Reich's assistant, said, "Dear Miss Dukes, we would appreciate if you could find somebody there who would, on our expense, pack our apparatus, which is still there, into a box and send it by railroad express to our address." Ilse Ollendorf. It goes on. But is any questions up to this point?
When the experiment was done in the ground,
Yeah.
there's no variance of the temperature in the ground.
There was. The same thing.
No, that's what I think.
Oh.
Normally, there is no variance of temperature in the ground that would have cast doubt on the differential in the two.
Well, yeah, I mean, Dr. Reich was aware of that, and he would say, well, you got this apparatus here in the ground and this one here, and it's probably a little warmer or colder here or there.
Right.
And Dr. Reich would change in many positions in the ground. He would constantly get the TO minus T difference, anywhere from 0.1 centigrade up to 0.6 centigrade. And whether it was in spring, summer, or winter, it's constant. So, Dr. Reich, I didn't read that. That was a technical thing. And after Einstein's assistant, his name was Enfeld, which is very important at the end, dismissed the first one when it was on the tabletop by saying it was convections and currents and all of that. And they never did the ground experiments, and they just ignored the Dr. Reich experiments there. And where Einstein was, very enthusiastic and spent a lot of time with Dr. Reich, and he just shut up. It's obvious that he was not supposed to mention to anybody. They both agreed that they would not talk about anybody. And Einstein obviously talked to other people, and this was in 1941. 41, yeah. When the plague, of Dr. Reich's work in Norway with the electrical experiments and the accumulators, and there were a lot of red fascists working at the institute at that time. Several of them. Who was the one that got into a lot of trouble? Who was that? With the atomic energy, the bomb. Oppenheimer. He was there too at the time. Well, that's only, we don't know. But we know Enfeld was.
Was Dr. Reich aware at the onset of Einfeld's association with the East German?
No. No, that was at the end. That was at the end. He wasn't aware of Enfeld being there either.
So they had more contact.
Who?
Einstein and Dr. Reich.
Oh, yeah. So this is already in November 14th, 1941. Dear Mrs. Dukes, that's Einstein's secretary, we received today the box with the instruments and wish to thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. See, Dr. Reich always acted like a gentleman and very like a gentleman, period. Unfortunately, you must have overlooked it to enclose the orgonoscope, which Dr. Reich left there at his first visit. We enclose a sketch of the orgonoscope for your information and would be thankful if you would forward this instrument at your earliest convenience. And then Helene Dukes wrote back right away, Dear Miss Ollendorf, the instrument which you mentioned was accepted by Professor Einstein as a present from Dr. Reich, but it is naturally at the disposal of Dr. Reich at any time. He could go down there and study it, use it. If you do not need it very urgently, I would propose that I shall bring it to New York occasionally and leave it with friends at Forest Hills, where you can have somebody call for it and use it. Bring it to New York occasionally, If it was nothing.
That's a remarkable letter.
Yeah. In case that you should need the instrument at once, kindly let me know and I will forward it to you through the mail. What did he want it for, Ilse Ollendorf. Dear Mrs. Dukas, Dr. Reich needs the orgonoscope that you have there for the installation of a correction at the detector plate. Would you therefore be kind enough to bring it to New York occasionally? As soon as we have one of these instruments to spare, we shall return the orgonoscope to Professor Einstein. A follow-up letter by Ilse Ollendorf. Dear Miss Dukas, I have asked you several weeks ago to return the orgonoscope. We have not received it as yet. Return the orgonoscope occasionally. We have not received it as yet, and we would be thankful to you if you could take care of this matter as soon as possible, as we need the instrument urgently at the present time.
What was the date on that question?
January 1542. The war was on. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's right in the middle of the
Well, yeah, 41.
bombing.
It's right up to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Dear Miss Ollendorf, the orgonoscope will be forwarded to you today by Railroad Express. I use the precaution of wrapping the lenses separately and placing it in the same package. And that was that. And then T.P. Wolfe, Theodore P. Wolfe, I don't know if many people know who he was. Dr. Reich T.P. Wolfe was a very close associate of Dr. Reich and one of the earliest physicians to make contact with Dr. Reich in America. He and Flanders Dunbar, they were at the Psychiatric Institute at Columbia University, and they published probably one of the earliest books on psychosomatic medicine. And then when he became aware of Dr. Reich and his work, he worked quite closely with Dr. Reich. In fact, he translated all of Dr. Reich's books from German to English. Character analysis and function of the orgasm, volumes 1 and 2, and Listen Here, Little Man, the rest of them. And he was really, I studied in the seminars with T.P. Wolfe, and he was really something. Very, very brilliant guy. So Dr. Reich had T.P. Wolfe write to Einstein. This is now February 14th, 1944, and there was a reason for that. Dear Professor Einstein, you will remember the discussion with Wilhelm Reich about the orgone energy in 1941 and the ensuing correspondence. Since that time, a number of readers of our publications have inquired whether you knew about this discovery. Unfortunately, we do not feel in a position to answer these queries because we never understood why you did not reply to Wilhelm Reich's extensive expose of February 20, 1941, in which he submitted the experimental refutation of your assistant's explanation of the temperature phenomenon. Recently, however, a new factor has been introduced into the situation. A rumor has been circulated that you undertook controlled experiments and were unable to confirm the findings. This is an attempt to discredit the findings, which, in view of the importance of these findings, cannot be taken lightly. This is to inform you that, in view of these queries and rumors, it will be necessary to publish the relevant facts from these discussions and your letter of February 7, 1941, to Wilhelm Reich. Yours truly, Theodore P. Wolff. And Einstein replied in a couple of weeks, personally, not through his secretary. My dear Dr. Wolff, I received your letter of February 14th. I have to draw your attention to the fact that you have no right to publish anything I have written to Dr. Reich without my permission. Well, he never asked Dr. Reich for permission to reveal it to many other people. I do not give my permission for any publication of the kind you suggested, and I have to inform you that I shall take steps to prevent any misuse of my name in this connection. I cannot have my name used for advertising purposes, especially in a matter which has not my confidence. Is it confidence? Yeah. And Dr. Reich got a letter from a lawyer that Einstein sent to Chandler. I am sending you herewith to close the following documents. Letter from me to Einstein on December 30th, 1940. Letter from Einstein to me of February 7th, 1941, in which he confirmed the existence of the temperature differences, but supplies it with a misinterpretation of his insisting, and to you directly by Dr. Wolff, sent to you directly by Dr. Wolff. My extensive letter to Einstein of February 20, 1941, with experimental refutation of the interpretation of Einstein's assistant. I have never received an answer to this letter, which was not understandable to me and all my co-workers. Not being able to imagine that Einstein could behave unpolitically, I continued in two more letters to tell him about the Oregon research. These letters too remained unanswered. Letter from Wolff to Einstein of February 8, 1944. This letter was caused by the rumors we heard to the effect that Einstein had been unable to confirm the findings, which was not true. 5. Excerpts of a letter I wrote to Neil on September 6, 43. A.S. Neil, you probably know, a very close friend of Dr. Reich, and had a very, large reputation in England, and spoke to Dr. Reich quite a bit. In fact, there's a book, correspondence between Reich and Neil. In response to his urgent request, why do not get in touch with Einstein. The whole situation is preposterous, and I am afraid we shall not be able to escape a public cleanup of the affair. And Dr. Reich wrote another. I'll read this one. Dear Professor Einstein, Dr. Wolf sent me a copy of your letter. As the responsible leader of a group of decent scientific workers and of work of great significance, I must protest against the insult contained in your letter. At first you declared your readiness quite spontaneously to support this work in case the phenomena of the temperature difference, which you call a bombshell in physics, were confirmed. It confirmed itself before your own eyes. Then your assistant submitted an erroneous interpretation of the phenomena, which interpretation I refuted by experiment. You have failed to answer the long expose in which I communicated this experimental refutation to you. Subsequently, you were shown the greatest confidence by the communication of most important findings and hypotheses. Thus, enemies of my work began to utilize your authority in physics against me by falsifying facts and circulating rumors in a well-known fashion. After having postponed the publication of the facts presented to you in 1941 for over 3 years, we now ourselves forced to present the true facts to the public. I asked Dr. Wolf to notify you in advance of the necessity of this publication. That is, I showed every consideration. To this you answered in an insulting manner by representing us as Geschäftemacher.
What?
Geschäftemacher.
That's a German?
Yeah. It's probably obviously
Something like some kind of makers.
who want to misuse your name for propaganda purposes. Entrepreneur. The basic facts of orgone physics are too earnest and too well-founded to propagate by shabby means. Thus far, they have established themselves without your confirmation. They will continue to do so. You have no right to insult industrious, honest people who make the greatest personal and material sacrifices for scientific research work. As I told you, and it is confirmed by documentary evidence, there is no profit involved in orgone research. On the contrary, it consumes a great amount of money, and I can tell you that. And anybody who worked with him can tell you that. Dr. Reich certainly didn't profit by it because he lived, all the money he was ever given all went into equipment and instruments, and for his living. He didn't live meagerly, naturally, why should he? But he didn't have a Cadillac and smoke Cuban cigars like the government said he had when they brought him to trial. They went up to Maine and said he never smoked. Oh, he smoked cigarettes, but not Cuban cigars. You have no right to, why? Your attitude is incomprehensible to me. If you want to prevent misuse of your name, you should proceed against the rumor mongers and not against us. Letter from Dr. Reich. Dear Reich, you do a great injustice to me in contending that I put into circulation disadvantageous views of your endeavors. I did not answer your last letter because I had formed an opinion as best I could and because I am not in a position to give it any more time. I have to ask you to treat my oral and written utterances with discretion, as I have always done with yours. Sincerely yours, Albert Einstein. And Dr. Reich, Albert Einstein. Dr. Reich put in his handwriting at the bottom of the letter, what an innocence. Talking about...
A real change of attitude in that way.
Yeah. Then Dr. Reich wrote back to Einstein's lawyer, Dear Mr. Chandler, 7 days ago I had written to Dr. Einstein protesting against the suspicion as expressed in his letter to Dr. Wolf Thereupon, I received a letter from Dr. Einstein, which settles the conflict, at least for the time being. He wishes his discussion and his correspondence with me to be kept discreet. Dr. Einstein assures me that he did not set any disadvantageous rumors into the world. He does not refute my statement that he had affirmed my findings of the temperature differences phenomenon on the Oregon accumulator, and he assures me also that he keeps my communications confidence. Therefore, I think we should comply with his wishes. People should try again to misuse his name against me. In case emotionally, we shall have to face the problem once more. I ask you to keep the conflict between me and Einstein a secret. And here's the last letter that he wrote to Einstein. Dear Professor Einstein, I have asked Dr. Wolf not to publish the results of our meeting for the time being. I regret to say that your last letter to me on February 24th did not solve the riddle of this affair. It is still not understandable why you did not answer my very sincere letter of February 20th, 1941. If you would have written to me at that time that you could not spend any more time on this matter, a possibility which I mentioned myself in this letter to you, I would have been in a position to answer truthfully questions asked by people interested in the work. I would have been able to answer any questions as to whether you have been informed about the discovery of the Oregon and what your opinion is in that matter by explaining that you are too busy to go into this matter. But by not answering your letter, you have created the unpleasant situation as it exists today. I personally would let the matter go as it is, as I have no interest in officially confirmations of my findings or in publicity. But unfortunately, I am not alone in the eyes of the public. A number of responsible and outstanding scientific workers have the most ardent interest in the discovery of the Oregon from the standpoint of their special field of work. They are not willing to be as considered as I am. Thus, I find myself in a conflict between consideration with request to your wish to keep the material of our meetings discreet, and the other consideration to have the existence of our universal cosmic energy, which I call Oregon, generally accepted. I do not maintain that you started rumors detrimental to my work. I did not maintain that enemies of the Oregon research are misusing your authority in a malicious manner. Okay. And then he wrote to Dr. Obermeyer, a student of his in Norway, to put an official library, the whole Einstein affair in Palestine at that time, 44. I guess it was in Israel then.
Who was in Israel?
Obermeyer. Then, in March 17, 1950, Dr. Reich saw this article in the New York Times. Scientists leave studied. Einstein ex-associate seeks to teach again in Poland. Ottawa, March 16, 1950. Opposition leader George Dress in the House of Commons this afternoon raised the question of the propriety of permitting Dr. Leopold Infeld, a former associate of Dr. Albert Einstein and at present a teacher of physics at the University of Toronto, to return to Warsaw to organize certain educational programs in cooperation with the Communist government of Poland. And Dr. Reich wrote at the bottom, the answer to the great Einstein riddle. The news report explained with one stroke in 1950 what had been a riddle to me since I met with Einstein. Einstein's peculiar behavior after his initial enthusiasm. Maju had done a job once again. Maju is a character that Dr. Wright created about people who pestilence, plague pestilence. But Einstein, Infeld did somehow to get to Poland, and he was put in charge of the Polish atomic bomb field. Also, soon after that, practically all the books of the press, Oregon Press, were ordered in Poland and Russia, and even copies of the accumulator. And that was that. And
it also should be added to that recent accounts place many of the people around Einstein and associates of Einstein, including Oppenheimer and others, as probably having currency with the members of the KGB and other Soviet spy apparatus, as revealed from KGB records in
oh yeah,
the Soviet Union.
what did you see that? Read
It was
that?
in the New York Times, and it's in the new study that came out from one of the heads of the KGB who's writing
Oh,
his
yeah.
memoirs.
Oh yeah.
They say how far back it dated.
And they go back to the 1940s, particularly during the collaboration between the United States and the Soviet Union, because at that point it was also considered appropriate.
Right.
But Oppenheimer probably remained what was known as a fellow traveler or sympathetic. There's no evidence that he passed on any vital information, but there was a general aura around the whole work on atomic energy. And this particular man, Enfield, is known, historically, to be more than just a fellow traveler. He was an active agent of the KGB and the Polish Communist Party.
If you remember at the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned this whole Hubble telescope and hoping they could find out where 90% of the mass in the universe was. And of course, at that time, Einstein said space was empty except for what we see. And this is the last one. Note, Wilhelm Reich and Einstein. Einstein succeeded in fascinating the first half of the 20th century just because he had emptied space. Emptying space, reducing the whole universe to a static nothing, was the old theory that could satisfy the desert-like character structure of man of this age. Empty and mobile space in a desert character structure fits well together. Well, this is describing Einstein's. It was the last attempt on the part of armored man to withstand and withhold knowledge of a universe full of life energy, pulsating in many rhythms, always in a steady development and change. In one word, functional and not mechanistic, mystical, or relativity. That's Einstein. It was the last barrier in scientific terms to the final breakdown of the human being. Now, of course, that was Einstein, but now, as we all know, astrophysics very much said there's 90% of mass out there, and that space is not empty, and they keep looking. Well, no, we hope they keep looking. But what's the answer? Is it Oregon energy? Because
That's what occurred to me when I read the article.
what?
That's what occurred to me when I read that article in the Times.
Yeah, I mean,
It has to be understood that looking for mass is an attempt on their part to explain gravity.
yeah,
Because for them, for these scientists, classical scientists, who operate in the material, or
Right.
only in the material universe, for them gravity is a function of mass. And Reich himself was, I believe, working
On
on the
negative gravity.
gravitational function.
Well, he was working on
as
negative gravity.
as an organotic
Yeah.
function, a
And-
function of orgone energy.
And of course,
And
it's
so-
I'm sorry.
And so these scientists have to look for mass because they don't recognize an energetic function.
No, they can't detect it with their instruments. Orgone energy is energy before mass. And nuclear energy is energy after matter is exploded. Now, so
Also, if you remember in that article, associated with that article, was a statement that Einstein had initially prepared a number of papers in which he felt he withdrew from publication, earlier papers before the final publication of the breakthrough papers on relativity, in which he came to different conclusions. I mean, Einstein at one point in his career had been much more in line with what was known as ether, the theory of the ether, or the sense of the universe as a and then consciously, and in the new correspondence that's now being available, made very, very clear decisions for various reasons to withdraw papers and findings that he felt would not be accepted in the mainstream of physics. Now, of course, some of those papers, in light of the material that's coming out from the new material from the Hubble, are being looked at again as possibly having more relevance than was assumed back at the point in which relativity theory became the dominant sort of coffin, nail in the coffin of ether.
but 90% of mass they can't account for it.
There's another thing. I don't know if Einfeld or someone else was the executor of Einstein's estate. And after Einstein died, he went back to either Germany or Poland. It might have been Einfeld, might have been another person.
No, Einstein was just a.
And he was the executor of Einstein's estate. And he did go back to the East Region Bloc countries. This was reported.
No, that was on.
Einfeld.
No, but he was not an executor. He was.
He was.
I just explained it.
No, I know, but he also was appointed executive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or if it was
Well, Helen Dukas went back to Europe too. At different times.
whoever was the executive,
She was clearly very closely associated with East German associates in the world of physics.
So, Dr. Lewis, then, according to what you said a moment ago, there's still some hope that Einstein will get credit for the discovery of the cosmic ocean.
Who knows?
I mean, so in other words, if Dr. Reich's theory that gravity is an energetic function
Function of orgone.
is correct, then they can keep looking for the mass, that 90% missing mass,
Well,
they'll never find it.
Well, that's it. I mean, orgone energy can only be detected by.
they'll call it something else.
The point is, the reason they're looking for the mass is because they believe mass is responsible for all gravitational
Gravity.
effects.
Yeah.
If they're incorrect in that assumption, and
Right.
if there's some other explanation for the motion of the bodies in the sky, in the universe, then it might show that they're wrong about how much mass ought to be there.
They never. Well, maybe they do ask where did mass come from originally? Well, some will say it was there, And what Dr. Reich said, of course, all mass is a function of orgone energy. So
It's not. It's
I
not.
remember one time I said, "Where does orgone energy come from?" He said, "Let's not get into that."
But it's not commonly held that mass precipitates from energy.
No. Mass is frozen energy. I mean, energy particles attract each other, fuse, and it becomes mass.
And so it precipitates from mass. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
well.
from energy.
Yeah.
Precipitates
Oh, I
from
see. I
energy.
didn't know. I thought you said.
But that's not commonly held.
Oh no. No, I don't know. Does anybody know? They've given any hypothesis? It's all.
As to where it comes from?
With mass God given, so-called?
Well, more and more in cosmology, the top cosmologists are beginning, you see articles constantly beginning to speculate on the
Right.
possibility that there is a God
Right.
or a God force behind it, which is very consistent with Reich's point that when mechanistic science or mechanistic thinking reaches a point where it cannot explain it within its particular conceptual frame, that then the only solution is mysticism.
Yeah, well-
And that the most atheistic mystical, the most atheistic scientific operator will eventually, if pushed far enough, have to speculate or at least postulate the possibility that
Well,
God is the source. Of
all religions, when you start pushing them in a discussion, for example, Catholic religion, about the Virgin Mary, the birth, and everything else. Finally, they said, I remember I was speaking to a Monsignor one time. He says, I accept it on faith. So it's the same thing. Was Mass always there? It's like saying we accept it on faith. But they're still trying to explain or interpret gravity and electromagnetism too. What's the function of?
What do you think would have made Einstein so susceptible to Einfeld's influence?
Well, apparently Einstein was quite a learned and well-established physicist. But Einstein, I guess he used it for that purpose. And Einstein was, of course, Einstein had to leave the Nazis and everything, escaped, But, so therefore, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And,
Einstein was also involved at that time in the nuclear
yeah.
program, and I think they had absolute secrecy on that. They tried to, or they were supposed to.
Oh, they were pretty secret.
Maybe that was a factor in it that he was advised not to get involved in anything like this. I know some who got some contact with Einstein at different
Louder,
times,
louder.
and he was either actually an innocent or he acted like an innocent in many things. He made himself accessible to the most nebbish and simplistic things, and then he would get involved in it because he wanted to support people's activities.
That's an idea, yeah.
There's another factor which I'm not sure is mentioned in the correspondence, but it has to do with the second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
If Reich's findings are correct,
Right.
then the second law of thermodynamics has to be overthrown.
Right.
Now, for somebody, entropy, the idea
The
that
universe is running down.
closed systems tend to go in the direction of more entropy, and the only way you can maintain a temperature difference between two parts of space would be by some kind of energy coming in from outside the system. And otherwise, there would be the two temperatures would eventually equalize.
Right.
It's classical physics,
Right.
which I'm not an expert on. But
Yeah. Well, the second law of thermodynamics, the universe is running down.
so for Einstein to affirm Reich's findings, as he originally said, would have been revolutionary, and he then would have had to rethink physics altogether.
Right.
And he would have been challenged from every corner of the
Well,
scientific
in the
establishment.
full reading of the case notes on the affair, which were finally published, or not published, they were made available. Reich says, and Einstein in your discussion said, if this is
Right.
correct, we have to rethink all of contemporary.
Right, so I'm just raising the question to what extent Einstein may have felt threatened on that account, because to accept the finding would have been to challenge his whole conception of physics, and I don't think he was in a position intellectually or emotionally to deal with it.
Eric, look at not the first time in history of science when those established were killing it, with Copernicus with the church, and Galileo. And you say, well, that was all mystical religion. But it was no different then. Everybody wants to protect their ballywhack, even though. Well, remember the last time I mentioned when our lawyer, Mr. Green, went to he was a lawyer in Jersey, and he represented the pharmaceutical industry in Jersey, and in many cases, and he got involved with organ therapy because his daughter, who had been quite sick, I won't mention the diagnosis, and she got into treatment with Dr. Baker, and was helped quite a bit. And so when the government issued the first complaint against Dr. Reich, we hired Mr. Green, and he agreed to help Dr. Reich. Anyhow, at one time there was a American Association of the Pharmaceutical Industry in Jersey, Atlantic City, and Mr. Green went to it, and he knew the president of the Pharmaceutical Association, and just very naively said, I heard about this guy, Dr. Reich, and his accumulator. Have you heard about it? Oh, yes, we heard about it. What do you think about it? Oh, it's a lot of crap. But I'll tell you, if it did work as he says it worked, he said we would kill it. It would kill us. That word for word. So, everybody's a conservative. They want to conserve what they got.
I think also historically, in terms of Einstein, what's often understood, at the time that Reich, many people even at that time, possibly even Dr. Reich, didn't know, at the time that he made his initial contact with Einstein, Einstein was already essentially under attack in modern physics, in terms of the later work after the initial work on relativity, and was beginning to be considered, so in quotes, while he had become a celebrity and a public figure, in mainstream physics, he was already constantly being questioned on directions he was taking in terms of his later work. And so there well might have been a reticence to be publicly identified with anything as controversial as this, in the sense that he had more he felt in some ways he had more trouble than he needed. So I think that there were a lot of factors probably mitigating against his throwing his weight behind that.
Yeah, but at the same time, Dr. Reich was the first one to acknowledge that Einstein contributed a lot to the. So let's not do what the plague does, tear down. He did, but in this particular case, it was.
No, to me, I thought one of the most telling statements in there was Dr. Reich's final statement saying that all you had to do was to offer me the simple courtesy of saying, I can't be involved in this, or I no longer wish to pursue this, which he didn't do. And that was, in a sense, characterologically, I think, the issue that was really...
The thing that I find interesting, I see sort of a long article in this Tuesday's Times about the universe and so forth, that there are several very contradictory things that have come to their attention. Number one, that the universe can't possibly be near as old as it needs to be in order to prove the Big Bang Theory. And they're juggling these two things, but they never stop and say, well, maybe if there's something wrong with my initial premise. But they keep on thinking the same way, even though it can't possibly be right because of the contradictions.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I'd like to draw people's attention to a series of articles that were written by Dr. Konia that have appeared in the Journal of Ergonomy in the last, I think, about 6 years. All these articles are on the subject of cosmology. And one of Dr. Konia's very interesting observations regarding classical science disproving the existence of the ether or the orgone ocean is based upon ignoring the very first experiments by Michelson and Morley using the spectroscope. And there were findings that Michelson and Morley could not explain if there was no ether. These two very eminent, respected scientists just ignored those findings.
Yeah.
And this is clearly described in Dr. Coney's article.
With the discussion about steady state or it's expanding all the time, and the Big Bang, it fits into the expansion and contraction of foregone energy so neatly. The universe, obviously, eons of time. You're getting all these black holes, which is a contraction. Probably eons of time. The whole universe, our universe, but they talk about eons of universes. I don't. They're going to contract, and then the density gets like, and it'll expand again.
Pulsation, basic function of
And Einstein said, we're off the subject I was talking, that our existence is just a chance matter, chance way of molecules and atoms getting together, and mass is formed, we're formed, and it's just a chance matter. And that someday we'll all be sitting here again.
No, we're not someday. We all are sitting here again. We all are sitting here again.
We were here.
We were all, I mean, that's the key to
Yeah.
Just
phenomenology.
earthquakes, what they call the shifting plates, isn't that a manifestation?
Well, that's
of
more
that?
a mechanical thing, I would imagine.
that-
But
isn't it expansion and contraction?
it could be some sort of a reaction to the energy ocean. I don't know. It's a good question. What would you want?
Do you think that there's a profound similarity between the relationship that Dr. Reich had with Dr. Freud at the end of their connection, and the same type of is it the same type of thing that occurred in the relationship between Einstein and Dr. Reich? In other words, this disavowal that came after acknowledgement. Is this like a syndrome that Dr. Reich went through? First with Dr. Freud.
Well, no, not a syndrome. I mean, it was just Dr. Reich coming up against the armored character who could only go so far with. Look, even among his students, me, the rest of us, everything would be nice. Dr. Reich would reach a certain point, then you wouldn't see him for a year. Well, very rarely for a while. Then he'd advance to a new stage, like when he came out with the. Even Ilsa, he came out with the doorbuster and all like that, and even. Dr. Reich was going around Organon, the field with the cloudbuster. And Dr. Reich heard from somebody, Ilse saying, there goes Dr. Reich now with another crazy thing. And when he introduced it to us, he'd gone too far. And that's why many times he would make another step. He didn't want us to be around. He said, we just held him back, which is true. Now, if he had not gone to jail, God knows where he would have been. Oh, sure. The armored organism is afraid of change, afraid of the unknown. We always are. And, that's characterological. Even our own personal life, when we're in a terrible situation, in a relationship that's no good, and we're afraid of change. We say, we know what we got, but I'm not talking personally. We know what we got, but we don't know what we're going to get. So we constantly accepting the lesser two evils. And Dr. Reich, like when he first discovered the biomes, and he kept looking at the biomes, and he let some of his assistants look at them, and they couldn't see him. They couldn't see what he was seeing. And after a while, he said, am I crazy? I know I see them. And finally, little by little, all the Rockness and Nick Wall and the rest of them got to see what he was seeing, and then it became old hat. Then Dr. Reich would move on to something else. Well, we like nice and clean, and don't dirty up the
When
house.
are we going to be there?
There's one thing in common, that both Freud and Einstein were associates, or they were surrounded by people and followers who were afraid of any ideas like this would feed them an attitude. They would feed to Freud, they would feed to Einstein an attitude towards this. I would assume that people close to Freud were taking this to a Joseph Reich would reinforce any trepidations Freud had, and the same thing would happen with Einstein. He would ask me, what do you think of this? And they would, give an opinion, and bit by bit this.
Yeah, but that you would think so. But people, they just relax and accept what they've done. But you get that throughout the ages. Pasteur, Curies, Einstein himself had a fight. Freud certainly had a big fight, and I don't know. I think Freud. Well, they say he went back on his original observation, his abuse of.
The actual sexual abuse.
Yeah. Did Freud originally on the child abuse? First, he thought it actually happened, right?
Well, First, he thought that hysteria was always an effect of real sexual trauma. And then he thought more and more that in most cases the trauma was
Biological.
fantasy.
A fantasy, yeah.
But then even in, I think it was in 1909, when he wrote up the Wolfman case, he still emphasized that there are real traumas, that children really are abused, and one shouldn't assume necessarily.
Yeah, but then Freud say it occurs to all young girls.
At first, he thought every case of hysterical neurosis was the result of abuse. And in the Freud and Breuer book, a lot of those cases were traced back to a sexual abuse by older men. There was one case where it was a father, Freud disguised it as an uncle because he
But then he said it occurs in fantasy with every.
He couldn't believe that every single child who came to him who reported sexual contact with an adult could have experienced that, knowing some of the people involved.
Well,
he couldn't believe that in Victorian society of the time that every single father or mother or whatever could be capable of.
But the way I read it was he was afraid to publish it, that he would really be condemned by it.
Oh, he did publish.
No, he did publish it.
I mean, but then he went back on it.
Mason,
yeah.
whatever. Mason claims that he knew the truth of child sexual abuse. And
he finally lost his case, Masson.
Right, and he suppressed the knowledge. I haven't read Mason's book, but I don't think that's true. I think Freud, for whatever reasons of his own, really believed that these were universal fantasies.
If you read the Fleece letters, which are the complete, they cover that period where the transition took place, the letters from Fleece, from Wilhelm Fleece, it's clear that Freud, there's no evidence that Freud sat down at one point and decided, well, I'm going to completely abandon one theory and replace it with the idea of hysterical fantasy or sexual fantasy. But what happens is he gradually convinces himself and builds a convincing argument to reverse the overall.
And also, what played a key role, which is in the letter, I think, of September 1897 to Fleece. He talks about his self-analysis.
Right.
And he's discovered it in the fall of 1897, his own Oedipus complex. And he had a phobic neurosis. He had a trained phobia. And he knew he was a neurotic to a certain extent. And he would have had then to say that he was sexually abused himself by his own father. And he couldn't tolerate that idea.
Yeah.
And it probably wasn't true.
Right.
Also-
So he had recourse to the idea that he must have had sexual fantasies as an infant, and some of them involving his father.
And consistent with this, it's a
Well,
known
I just want to
documented
ask,
fact that Fleece
what's the
was
present
father.
day interpretation of that?
It's very controversial.
Still?
I mean, present-day psychoanalysis is based very much on the existence of infantile fantasies and their prolongation into adulthood. On the other hand, there's a growing body of literature that so-called borderline cases, which we would call severe, cases of neurosis with masochistic, strong masochistic trends, that in those cases, in a very large percentage, there is actual sexual abuse. But then there's a whole controversy about how you can verify that it actually took place. It's very controversial.
I wonder if these criminal cases, where they use that in court, my childhood, I was abused. I wonder if they allow fantasy abuse.
I think what's most intelligently written about it is Freud's own comments at the end of the Wolfman case. He had to decide, did the Wolfman really witness the primal scene, or was it a fantasy,
Right.
which all infants have? And Freud really couldn't decide. He was in favor of its having really taken place,
Right.
but he said he couldn't be sure,
Right.
because the material goes too far back
Yeah.
into the archaic prehistory of the
I mean, also interesting, while the correspondence with Fleece was going on, it is historically documented that Fleece was sexually abusing his son, who became a prominent psychoanalyst himself. And there were a number of other problems that Fleece had in terms of his own family situation, and in a lot of Fleece's letters, there are clear encouragements.
What was the actual abuse to Fleece and his son?
He was sexually, according to...
What?
He was manipulating the genitals, and there was sexual contact, according to the son, and other cooperation of family members.
What, did the son, did he feel he was abused at the time?
Well, in terms of his
Or
later
did he-
writings about it, he
Or
felt
did he
was.
enjoy it?
Well, I have to ask him.
Because you have to.
Yeah, right.
I've had patients, where they said they were abused. I said, "Well, you remember it? Yeah."
But what's
And did you enjoy it at the time? Yeah, it was very pleasant.
What's interesting is that Fleece, in Fleece's letters, there's a very strong desire to encourage Freud to move more towards the abandonment of the actual seduction theory.
Okay.
Should we? It's actually getting to now.
It's too late now.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we can just do is I was just looking at it, and we had hoped to possibly look at some blood in the microscope, which Mark Ringneri.
But then the next time we
set up.
could devote the whole thing to the body.
But actually, we're just looking at it, and there's really good deterioration. You can begin to see the T cells now very actively. So possibly what we do is take a break, and
Dr.
people
Sobey,
can
yeah,
look
microphone.
and ask questions of Dr. Sobey for the remaining 15 or 20 minutes if people are interested. And thank you. And anybody who hasn't paid me and who wants to be on the mailing list for the upcoming events, please get to it. Yeah.
Like anybody children in the old days,
It's very, very, very